Welcome to the channel. This is going to be a review of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, episode number 5. A good episode, lots more action in this episode, a lot more. I'd said before in some of the other reviews that it's unlike the Mr. and Mrs. Smith in the movies with Brad Pitt and Angela Jolie, mainly because there isn't as much action in this show. It's as I've described it, it's Sex in the City with guns. But what I really like about the show, and I do really like this show, it's the interaction between these two characters, John and Jane. They really get along well together. They're good match for each other. They're good match in the show. The dialogue between them is good. You see the character progression. You see what John is, what Jane is, or what Jane's becoming. So that's all very good in this show. So just quick rundown on the episode. They're given a task of going in, grabbing a target, and taking him to the safe house. So the show starts with, and they get some really good guest stars participating in the show, which speaks well for it. So in this case, um, the guest star is Ron Perlman. He's the target they're going after. So he plays a crotchety old guy and not very mobile, and apparently he's some kind of very evil person, but you never find out what he actually did because he starts off he's not going to tell anybody, and then at the end when he wants to tell them, they don't want to hear it. So that's what it is. But they put a bag over his head and throw him in the car, and they're driving away, heading towards the safe house when they get ambushed, and there's a gunfight. Now, the one thing I'd said about this show, it doesn't have a lot of action. This episode's the first one with a lot of action in it. Problem is, it's still not very good action. It's okay. It's serviceable. You do see some action, but the uh, the action on the part of John and Jane is not necessarily believable. There's too many headshots, one shot kills. There's a scene where John's backing the car away and Jane's shooting out the window. You can see her hand going up and down over the bumps as John backs out, and she kills two people while they're doing that, or one person at least. So they got some really good writers for the relationship part, the advancement of the character part, the overall arc of the story part, but they didn't have a very good writer for the spy shit, the action stuff. And this episode shows it a bit. It's still entertaining enough. They get into a high speed pursuit. They're shooting at the other party. It's good in that way. They eventually break up a wedding, or Jane does, by firing shots. They turn around the corner in the middle of a wedding. Jane pulls her gun out, scares everybody away. There's a car crash, and they have to flee their vehicle and try to get away on foot. And of course, Ron Perlman is an old man, and he just, again, he plays that, and he does a good job of it. He's not really this old and slow in other things I've seen him in, but he does very well at this complaining, bitching, whatever. There's a scene, a very funny scene, where they're trying to escape, and they see a boat on the waterfront, so they want to go see if they can get that boat and get away. So they have to go down a very minor couple of small jumps. And Ron Perlman's like pissing and moaning about having to do it, and he doesn't want to have to do it. And so Jane pops down and shows him it's very easy, and John goes down one level, and it's like, come on, and he's, nah, I'm not going to do it, even though people are coming up trying to kill him. And eventually John just grabs him and throws him down this very minor drop, and he's, you threw me off a building. It's like, no, not really, but anyways, that's kind of humorous. So anyways, though, they get to the boat and they talk to people owning the boat to take them away from where they are, and they go across a lake and they arrive at this cottage. So John knows the code to get into the cottage and where the key is, and Jane is like, how do you know this, how do you know this, how do you know this? And it comes out that I guess when they were here earlier, John saw this place online and bought it sight unseen, so it's actually the house, and that pisses Jane off. That no consultation because she's kind of an A-type person, so she doesn't like other people planning stuff, and that's character progression. You're seeing that that's what she is. She is type A, got to be leading from the front, doesn't like to be led, and all this stuff. And so, but that's just part of her character and how her character is written so well for her. But they get into a bit of an argument about that, and then it just turns into trying to get Ron Perlman to take some medicine because his stomach's upset and all this stuff, and John just has no time for him. And Ron Perlman's saying that he's not very nice and that Jane's nice, and Jane's defending him that he's nice most of the time. He just, he doesn't like you or whatever. But they finally get him to go to bed. He's whining about not getting a cigarette that was promised to him, but they get him to go to bed. And then they have a sitting out under the stars, drinking some wine, and they start getting intimate again until John says that he wants to get her pregnant, which sort of kills the mood. And Ron Perlman shows up and saying that he threw up and they have to go look after him. But that's sort of it. Then it moves to the next day, and they're making breakfast, and Jane spies some people coming down a cliff face, rappelling down, men in black, women as well. And she gets in, tells them all they have to get out of there really quickly, so they climb out a window, and they're going down to a dock where there's a boat. And John is trying to get the cover off the boat so he can get it started and they can get the hell out of there. And the house explodes. So that wipes out the team that is coming after them. Earlier on, they got the house, or John bought the house with all its contents, and apparently there was some dynamite in there that Ron Perlman picks up and is looking at, and they tell him to stop playing with that. So anyways, they get in the boat, get it started. They've been told to go into the middle of the lake, and they'll be picked up by a seaplane. So then they have a bit of a back and forth on the fact that she blew up his house, and she rightly so says, well, that was our house, wasn't it? So it was good that way. In the background, they have their handler. They've been calling him Hi because that was how he started the first dialogue. But he's giving them, she basically is the one communicating with them on her phone, lets them know that the safe house was compromised because when they got there were people there, and that's what caused more of the high-speed chase trying to get out away. So they get instruction, or she gets instructions about meeting in the middle of the lake, and then sort of goes a little weird that are you happy to Jane, and they're happy with her. She says, should I bring John in? And they're like, no. So she's always really handled the communications in most cases, except for I think in one episode John did it, and that was a failed mission. He was the one that reported on that. She's reported all the good ones. But at this point, she's complimentary to John that they work well together, and it's been challenging and that kind of stuff. But they sort of, in these communications, which sort of makes no sense why some kind of spy master would be concerned about how happy she is, but they are. So they, like I said, they hand over Ron Perlman, and she reports that everything's done. And again, they're, way to go, Jane. We see you moving up in the organization. And then she's like, yeah, oh, that's good. And then they're back at some location anyways, and they're gonna have some wine, and John asks her whether she's pregnant or not when she turns down the wine because she used that as an excuse to get on the boat and a few other things. And then that's where you see more that's the direction that John's thinking of having a family, that he'd be more than willing to drop down a level and just deliver packages, whereas Jane's more of a type A person, and she wants to move up in the organization. So they get into a bit of a conflict about that, back and forth, back and forth. And there's a knock on the door, and they get a bottle of wine, and it's congratulations, Jane. So then they get into a bit of a back and forth about, excuse me, her taking all the credit for most of the missions and stuff. And at that point, um, Jane is again communicating with their handler, and the handler says, we see big things from you. Do you want us to replace John? And that's the end of the episode. So there is some tension there about what she's going to do, because there's a thought that if she says yes, replace John, they'll replace him by taking him out behind the barn and shooting him, kind of thing. And I think she might be a little bit aware of that. But as it goes of the episode, the pacing jumps back and forth between the fight scenes and the dialogue, and it's fast, slow, fast, slow, fast, slow kind of thing. And that kind of works. It's good that they're incorporating more of the spy stuff, because that's what they're supposed to be, spies, although you never see them, what makes them good material for spies. They never practice, they never do anything, but they seem to just be able to get into a gunfight and walk it off. Um, but yeah, it's not a bad episode. More action in this episode. The action is not particularly good. It's certainly not John Wick level action. But that's not really what this show's about. The why I like it so much is basically the interaction between these two characters. That is the whole show, and it's very well written. And the two actors get along very well, are able to bounce back and forth off each other. It's good in that respect. So this episode is a little bit different in that there's more action, but there's still the same interplay between the characters and character development and a number of things like that. So again, this is why I do like this show. So that's it for this episode. Again, more of a fast-paced episode. Still all of the good character development. Still all the good interaction back and forth between the two characters. That was just a scene of the house exploding. Very well written dialogue. Very well written back and forth. This is a listing of a lot of the special guests, I'm going to call them. So Ron Perlman is in this episode. Parker Posey was in the last episode. So there's there's a lot of good people associated with this project, and that's another reason that kind of says to me that's of good quality. But again, it's the writing and the character. These two really work well together. It's very good in that aspect. So this is another good episode. I highly recommend this show. It is very interesting. Definitely hope there's a second series of it. And episode 5 is a little more character development, a little more tension brought in, because Jane's now being questioned on whether she wants to continue to work with John. You're seeing their characters go in different directions, and that John's more of a traditional family type person, and Jane is more of an A-type corporate ladder climber. So that's it. Hopefully that will do for this review. Again, I almost wanted to just lump all the episodes in. My original episode 1, I said I would do individual episodes, so that's why you're getting them. These are fairly short in nature, but yeah, this is a show that I like quite a bit and would recommend.